Welcome to the Fourth and Long Fantasy Football Show with Corey and Justin. Here they are, the Fourth and Long Fantasy Brothers.
Welcome to the Fourth and Long Fantasy Football Show. My name is Corey, and I am here with my actual brother, Justin.
Hi, this is Justin.
Justin, we got a fun Dynasty talk today, but before we do, this week came with the first big injury news of the summer. Justin, talk to me about Cam Akers.
Oh, man, what a blow, right? I mean, the young back was being drafted in usually the beginning part of the second round in most circles this offseason, and it's just a huge blow, an Achilles injury. They've immediately already ruled him out for the entirety of the 2021 season. He'll have plenty of time to rest and rehab, Corey, but the Achilles injury scares me because it's a pretty significant injury for a running back. You're talking about the ability to cut, jump, accelerate, et cetera, and you got to be concerned if you're a Cam Akers owner, especially in dynasty settings. You got to hope that the guy makes a full recovery here and he's back in action for the 2022 season. But I think more immediately, Corey, the question becomes, what does the Rams running back outlook look like this year now with Cam Akers out of the picture? Is it Darrell Henderson, or are the Rams going to, test that free agent market out there? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Justin, I would say that if the Rams end up just sticking with Henderson and the group that they have, then it certainly makes him worthy of a nice sort of low-end RB2 pick, high-end RB3 pick. But I'm not convinced we're done here. There's still a lot of veterans out there who have proven their worth over the years who might come in and take some touches away from Henderson. I don't think he's got the profile of a complete back and an all-down, all-purpose back. So I think there's more to come there in LA.
Guys like Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, still available. Could definitely see the Rams making a splash and signing one of those veteran guys to a one-year deal.
Yeah, so more as we get it, Justin. But with that said, we've got Dynasty talk today, so let's get to it.
On today's show,
Justin, we've got Dynasty and a little bit of a fun pick'em show going on today. Why don't you start us off by talking about some Dynasty strategy? What makes Dynasty fantasy football so unique and so much fun?
Dynasty's a lot of fun, Corey. It's an all-year activity, right? I mean, when you're talking about Dynasty versus redraft, you're looking at a couple different things. The first being that youth tends to get valued more than the veteran proven players, right? A lot of the guys that are either coming into the league or only have been in the league for a couple of years are definitely valued higher than, those guys that have been in the league for a number of years, like Julio Jones and Adam Thielen, et cetera, right? You're looking at guys like Justin Jefferson and DK Metcalf and, running backs like Christian McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor, who are valued at a much higher price than guys that have been in the league for a number of years. I think one of the main things I'll mention about Dynasty is that, as you're looking at a Dynasty roster and as you're looking at a Dynasty format for fantasy football, you want to remain active all year, right? It's important to keep your eyes on the news, right? Keep your eyes and ears focused on either your players' news or other news that's relevant and remain active. Corey, what are your thoughts on Dynasty? How do you feel about the format there and really the long-term sort of annual approach that goes into Dynasty fantasy football?
Yeah, Justin, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said. I think the only thing I'll throw in there with Dynasty is I think a overcorrection or an oversimplification from sort of the market and from Dynasty in general is to overvalue rookies. We don't know what rookies are yet. And I think it's important to sort of take it with a grain of salt based on, draft spot and landing spot and all of that. Last year at this time, CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy would be slam dunks over guys like Justin Jefferson. And here we are a year later, and Justin Jefferson is clearly someone that you'd want to own over both CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy. So I would just say, be cautious when it comes to rookies. Other than that, yes, youth has a bit of priority there because you want to build a team that's going to survive and be good for another 5 or 6 years before you start retooling again after that cycle is done.
Yeah, Corey, my mantra with Dynasty is always build for today and win for tomorrow, right? That's I think the approach is constant movement, right? Be reaching out to your league mates, trying to make trades, right? Trying to acquire draft picks, especially if you're in a keeper league setting where you're only keeping a set number of individuals, right? You want to try to liquidate those assets if you can't hold on to them. Try to get draft pick upgrades, right? Do your very best to be as active as possible. But Dynasty, man, is a lot of fun. And we're going to be structuring a lot of our discussion today around that whole Dynasty, sort of format, right? So as we go through guy by guy, right, we do kind of our pick 'em, right, by position. We're going to be using a Dynasty sort of lens to think about which guy we'd rather have.
Yeah, Justin. And speaking of that, let's start with the quarterback. First off, how valuable do you feel top quarterbacks are in dynasty formats?
Corey, you and I have always been advocates of the late quarterback strategy, right? Looking at, quarterbacks this year as an example, right? Guys like Ryan Tannehill and Matt Stafford and, guys in that range tend to produce and provide, about 70 to 80% of what a guy like Patrick Mahomes or Kyler Murray would typically produce on a weekly basis, right? But I think when you're talking about dynasty, it is important to have that position solidified, right? Having a guy like Patrick Mahomes or Kyler Murray or Josh Allen definitely gives your team in a dynasty format the leg up, but I wouldn't say it's the end all be all. I'm still going to preach the wait on quarterback method here, Corey. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. I would say that I think you can wait even in a dynasty format. Now, obviously, if it's pure dynasty where players are transitioning over year after year on those rosters, you certainly want to make sure you have one or two that are solid on your roster so that you can put forward a competitive starting lineup on a weekly basis. But if it's something where you're in more of a keeper dynasty league where there's limits, I say value skill position players way over quarterbacks whenever you can. Speaking of which, Justin, let's talk about a couple of second-year quarterbacks that are going into what could be promising fantasy football years. We have Justin Herbert, the rookie that no one expected to be good, and Joe Burrow, the rookie that everybody expected to be good. But this year, dynasty-wise, might be seeing similar value. What do you think with these two?
Yeah, I think they're both ranked relatively close as it relates to, right, startup dynasty quarterback rankings. But I think I'm going to go with Justin Herbert, Corey, if I'm picking between the two of them. Now, I do like Joe Burrow, right? I think that offense will be relatively productive this year. I think he'll have a lot of opportunity to throw the ball around in this Cincinnati offense. But I'm going to go with Justin Herbert, the proven talent, right? The guy that lit the league on fire as a rookie. He just has a group of weapons around him, right? With guys like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, Eckler coming out of the backfield. The newcomer Jared Cook, right? The veteran presence there at the tight end that's going to be stepping into Hunter Henry's old role. I just like the weapons that Herbert has. And I think the career trajectory will tend to favor a guy like Justin Herbert over Joe Burrow. But I think they're going to be close, right? If we look back in 5 years and we look at Herbert versus Burrow and we compare their 5-year production trajectory from here, they might be pretty similar. But I'm going to go with the proven guy, Corey. And I know you're probably going to go with Herbert as well, right?
Well, Justin, I'll say this. I like both of these guys' values. I think that Justin Herbert is going to be the guy, if you think back to, I think it would be 3 or 4 years now when Baker Mayfield was being ranked as like a top 6, top 7 quarterback because people just thought they saw something in Baker Mayfield that just wasn't there. I'm going to say that Justin Herbert is the guy that everyone thought Baker Mayfield was going to become because I think the talent's real there. So I'm going to go Herbert here, but I love Joe Burrow's value this year. He was a very, very sought after commodity last year in Dynasty and in redraft leagues. This year, I think he has depreciated value, and that could be a really appealing thing. Now, Justin, these two guys were in rookie situations last year. What about a couple rookies this year? We have Trey Lance, we have Trevor Lawrence. Which of these two are more appealing for you in Dynasty?
The ceiling for Trey Lance, Corey, is pretty high. You look at, the player he is, right? Kind of a combo of a Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes sort of player. The sky's pretty high for Trey Lance, but I'm going to go with Jacksonville quarterback Trevor Lawrence, just for the pure reason that he's sustained that long-term production at the collegiate level. As I've said numerous times over the course of our offseason shows, I think that his rushing ability is underrated. I think he could see Trevor Lawrence chip in, about 50 rushing yards a game, and maybe he gets you a touchdown here or there, and that's pretty dang valuable in fantasy football, Corey. I think Trevor Lawrence is one of my favorite late-round quarterbacks to target in redraft settings, and I think he should be off the board in the first 10 picks in most dynasty startup leagues for quarterbacks.
Yeah, Justin, I definitely hear what you're saying there. I think I might caution myself here. Again, like I said earlier in the episode, I like to wait when it comes to rookies if they're coming at expensive prices. I love rookies when they're coming in at values, but these two might be a little too expensive on draft day. Maybe if they fall to me, I'd be very happy to have them in a dynasty rookie startup or whatever it might be. It's definitely a situation though where I think Trevor Lawrence's ceiling is much higher. There's definitely a pedigree around him that looks really, really good. Now let's move on to the running backs, Justin, and let's talk about what is your strategy when it comes to running backs in Dynasty? Is there anything different? Is there any value change when it comes to the Dynasty format with this very valuable fantasy position?
Corey, the top tier running backs are definitely incredibly important in dynasty settings, right? I mean, they're important in redraft settings as well, but I think they're even that much more important in a dynasty format. Having a guy like Christian McCaffrey or, Derrick Henry or whoever it might be, you've all but solidified that RB1 position for anywhere from 5 to 7 years. One of the things I'll mention, especially when it comes to owning running backs in dynasty settings, is to keep in mind when that production typically hits that cliff and starts to fall off. It typically happens around that age, 27, 28 sort of range. So when you have running backs around that age, I would consider starting to sell them, even if there are still producing fantasy relevant seasons, because most likely you're only going to get one, maybe two, if you're lucky, maybe three more seasons out of that running back. But that's really what it comes down to with running back position. It's incredibly valuable, but you have to be careful about not overstaying your, having that running back overstay their time they need to be on your team.
Yeah, Justin, it's a tricky sort of time game that you're playing with running backs. Speaking of a couple of guys, though, who are going to be moving into their second year, a lot of upside. They flashed last year at different times. DeAndre Swift, Antonio Gibson. Which of these two guys has sort of the larger appeal when it comes to their career-long prospects as a fantasy football running back?
Yeah, two pretty talented second-year running backs here. And, if I'm picking between the two of them, I'm probably going to slightly lean Antonio Gibson's way, because I think there's so much more to Antonio Gibson's game than what we saw last year, right? You're talking about a converted wide receiver coming out of Memphis last year who really wasn't acclimated to the running back position at the professional level. And all reports this offseason as we, head into the 2021 season is that Antonio Gibson has really started to grasp the running back position, right? He's made significant strides in his ability to understand all phases of the game, right? Whether it's running the ball, catching the ball, pass protection, right, et cetera. So I think I'm going to go with the higher upside being Gibson, because I think Gibson has a more solid team around him, a better run organization around him. And I think that will in turn lead to some sustained RB1 production potentially over the next 5 years or so. Corey, who you got in this group?
Yeah, Justin, this is such a coin flip for me. You have two very different situations, and I do like both of these guys here. I think if you're forcing me, I'm going to say Gibson as well. I'm going to say that, again, I like his career prospects. I like what he could potentially be in that rising offense. The DeAndre Swift, maybe I feel like I need to see it again. Both of these guys in redraft, I'm probably going to be fading. They're coming at a very expensive price for me this year. In Dynasty, I'd be very happy with both of them. Probably just a little bit more happy if I would be on the Antonio Gibson train rather than the DeAndre Swift train. Now, speaking of these guys, and speaking of guys who, let's see what they'll look like in a few years, two guys who had the hype and appeal that these two did a couple of years ago were Miles Sanders and Josh Jacobs. Now, they're both coming off of disappointing years, but there's still a lot of hope out there. There's still guys who truly believe that these guys can be RB1s in the future. Of these two guys in Dynasty, who do you think has the better long-term appeal, Justin?
Yeah, a couple third-year backs here in Sanders and Jacobs, and I like them both, right? I think they're both priced relatively similar as we head into this season, but I think I'm going to lean a little bit into Josh Jacobs and his side right now at this point. You're talking about the draft pedigree, right? Being a first-round pick. And I think the signing of Kenyon Drake this offseason is being a bit overblown, right? I mean, there's always been another running back in that backfield that's complemented Josh Jacobs, whether it's in the passing game or spelling him on, some hurry up offenses here. But, I think Josh Jacobs offers a longer, more sustained RB2 sort of ceiling versus Miles Sanders, who's part of a new regime once again, and doesn't seem to be fully grasping the bell cow role, and the regimes that he's had don't seem to want to give it to him. So I think I'm going to lean Josh Jacobs here slightly, Corey.
Yeah, Justin, I think it's a very, very tricky move to follow money when it comes to fantasy football and just football in general. Many years ago, Dion Lewis was signed in Tennessee, and they thought it was going to be the death nail for Derrick Henry. Turned out not to be the case. And if Kenyon Drake had signed in Vegas for much less money, maybe people wouldn't be talking as much, but I think people are getting a little distracted by the money. Speaking of money, we've got some real top-tier money-making talent in fantasy football at the wide receiver position. Who's the clear number one wide receiver in Dynasty today, Justin? Is it Tyreek Hill? Is it Justin Jefferson, as we mentioned earlier in the episode? Is it A.J. Brown and his appeal and upside? Or is it Devontae Adams, the guy who just shows up year after year and is tied to that really productive situation in Green Bay?
So I think if I'm going to answer this question, I've got to think about multiple factors, right? I've got to think about, first off, their age, right? So obviously guys like Jefferson and AJ Brown have a slight nod over Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill. I've also got to think about the offense that they're currently a part of and the longer term outlook as it relates to those offenses. And I think, looking at the offenses here, I think Tyreek Hill obviously stands out as probably having the best situation long term, being tied to Patrick Mahomes. So Corey, if I'm picking the clear number one dynasty wide receiver today, I think I'm going to go with Tyreek Hill just because of he's still not that old, right? I think he's only 26 or 27 right now. And he's also tied to arguably one of the best talent-wise quarterbacks we've ever seen. So I'm going to go with Tyreek Hill, Corey, here.
Justin, in a situation where a couple of guys who really, could have been considered one of those top flight dynasty wide receivers in their day, Julio Jones, Kenny Golladay, right? Julio's probably got maybe one or two more great years left in him if he can do that in Tennessee. Kenny Golladay moving to a new situation, kind of getting the injury-prone tag. Which of these two would you rather have in Dynasty? Sort of the proven guy who's moving to a new offense, or the injury-riddled guy who has a lot of upside but just can't seem to stay on the field in a new offense?
Yeah, I like this pick-em matchup because I think that they're at different parts of their career, but they've also kind of provided relatively the same fantasy value over the last couple of years, right? You'll get really good seasons out of a guy like Julio Jones. Then you'll have those frustrating seasons where he misses a handful of games, or he's questionable, or he's out there hobbled, not really making an impact for your fantasy team over the course of that week, right? And then you've got Kenny Golladay, who's shown that he can be very productive, right? An elite sort of touchdown scoring wide receiver who still has plenty of years left in terms of his career. New offenses for both these guys. I think if I'm going to pick one of these guys in Dynasty, I'm probably going to go with Kenny Golladay just because he's younger. He signed long-term with the Giants. I think last year, the injury plague season he dealt with was, I think, a bit of a business move at the same time as being, him just being cautious. I think he realized that he shouldn't risk coming back and re-injuring himself further. So I think he kind of sat out last year, unfortunately, and set himself up to get a big payday here this offseason. So I'm going to go with Kenny Golladay, Corey, just because of the age, the potential production. I think he's got a little bit more upside as it relates to what Julio Jones has left in the tank.
Agreed, Justin. I'm gonna back you up on that one there. Now, talking about another couple of guys, let's go with young, really talented, really, really well-respected guys in fantasy football at the wide receiver position who are stuck in tough situations. Chris Godwin, stuck in a situation in Tampa where he's always probably going to be considered that de facto number 2 behind Mike Evans, but in a really potent offense. And then you have DJ Moore, who, again, everyone really loves when they watch him play, but he just can't seem to find the end zone. And he's also in sort of a weird offensive situation in Carolina. Which of these two guys would you rather have? Would you rather have Chris Godwin, or would you rather have DJ Moore?
This is a good one, Corey, because, you look at DJ Moore and Chris Godwin, they both have had, relatively similar career trajectories. I think Godwin obviously having that really special season 2 years ago where he finished as, the number one wide receiver in some formats. I think that helps elevate his value slightly. I think it shows his potential upside versus what DJ Moore's done. We've talked about DJ Moore on these episodes in the past, and the lack of touchdown production over the last couple of years has been concerning. Right, he's never scored more than five receiving touchdowns in a season, and that's a bit concerning. Chris Godwin's going to be a free agent after this season, so it could be interesting to see if he's able to work out a long-term deal with the Bucs and stay there, or if he finds himself in a different situation after this season comes and goes. I think if I'm going to lean into one of these wide receivers, I think I'm going to go with DJ Moore, Corey, just slightly over Chris Godwin because of the uncertainty around Chris Godwin's production this year, right? I think he'll be productive, but with all those mouths to feed in that Tampa offense, it's definitely questionable. And then you also look at his longer term sort of projection, not knowing if or if not he'll be back with the Buccaneers after this season, right? If Tom Brady's still the quarterback, it could be interesting. So I'm going to lean DJ Moore here just because of the track record of production, even though he has had some bad touchdown luck. And I think a little bit more of that stable future here going forward.
All right, Justin, we're running low on time, so let's do the tight end situation very, very quickly. Let's talk about Kyle Pitts and Travis Kelce. Now, if you're going into a dynasty situation, the upside of Kyle Pitts is huge. But if you are someone who just wants to perform now, Travis Kelce is the guy to have and should be a valuable tight end for at least another 3 more years. Which of these two would you rather have on your dynasty roster?
This is a good one, Corey. And I think this is a good debate to have, right? Because you're talking about the guy that could arguably be the number 1 tight end for the next 10 to 12 years, right? If Pitts really hits like we think he will. But then you've got the guy, Travis Kelce, who's had sustained production over the last 5-6 years already, and probably will continue to be the tight end 1 for the next 3, 4, maybe even 5 years. I think I'm going to go with the proven commodity here, Corey, and Travis Kelce tied to the better quarterback in Patrick Mahomes. I'm curious what your thoughts are, though.
Yeah, Justin, I'm going to go with Travis Kelce as well. I just think that when it comes to dynasty, you cannot assume too much. And you also at the same time want to take advantage of a situation where people are undervaluing veterans. I'm not saying Kelce is being undervalued in dynasty, but I definitely think that he's someone who's so proven, such a proven commodity in fantasy that you can just sort of set it and forget it for at least the next 3 or 4 years with Travis Kelce. And then you can worry about tight end a little bit later when you're, working on your rookie drafts in future years. I understand Kyle Pitts is a once in a lifetime type of tight end prospect, but there's always going to be opportunities in fantasy football. Football turns over so much. Now, Justin, last but not least, let's go with another couple of guys in dynasty. This is kind of an interesting scenario because these are 2 guys who are going right around the same area in both redraft and dynasty setups. We're going to go with Dallas Goedert, the guy who just seems to be loved when you look at his film, but just hasn't proven it yet in Philly. And then Noah Fant, another guy who's young and talented, but is maybe in an offense that just isn't clicking with him just yet. Which of these 2 guys in a dynasty situation would you rather have on your roster?
I think I'm going to lean Dallas Goedert here, Corey, just for the pure reason that I think this year he finally gets the shot to be the clear and away number 1 passing target in this offense. I think that Zach Ertz is probably going to find himself out the door here as we approach the season. There's, every rumor and everything we've heard so far is pointing to the possibility that the very high possibility that he is in fact traded or released outright. So I fully expect Dallas Goedert to have firm control of this tight end room, and I think he will be the preferred target safety blanket of Jalen Hurts. I think Corey's got top 5 tight end upside for the next 5 to 7 years, and I like that out of the tight end position.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there, Justin. I would say that Dallas Goedert would be the guy to own as well between these 2 players. I actually really like what he might be able to do as a tight end this year in fantasy. So that will do it, Justin. Please remember, everybody, to comment and like on this video on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, and please find us anywhere you can find podcasts. Any of that or anything else that you can do to show some support. I'm Corey.
And I'm Justin.
And this has been the 4th and Long Fantasy Football Show. We'll see you next time.
Royalty-free music courtesy of Ben Sound. The views and opinions expressed on today's episode are that of the 4th and Long Fantasy Football Show. Remember to like and subscribe.